Political scandals are as old as politics itself. Greed and self-importance often go hand in hand with power, money, and cronyism, causing many a politician to stray from the straight and narrow. When the dirty details come out, the voters fume, comedians laugh, and politicians blush. Some scandals, such as extramarital affairs, are merely personal. These may be mostly just embarrassing for the parties involved. Others involve wrongful death or an abuse of power at the highest level. These types of scandals can cripple even the most promising careers. The Greeks had a word for it: hubris. It means the arrogance that leads to ruin. Thinking they are above the law or immune from any consequences, politicians sometimes take actions that prove to be self-destructive. Political scandals happen all over the world, and many are as outrageous as any soap opera. This video takes a look at some of the most infamous ones. Number 1. Teapot Dome Scandal. The Teapot Dome Scandal was the largest of numerous scandals in the United States during the presidency of Warren Harding. Teapot Dome is an oil field located on public land in Wyoming, reserved for emergency use by the U.S. Navy. Oil companies and politicians claimed the reserves were not necessary, and that the oil companies alone could supply the Navy in the event of shortages. In 1922, Interior Secretary Albert B. Fall accepted $404,000 in gifts and loans from oil company executives in return for leasing the rights to the oil at Teapot Dome to Mammoth Oil and Pan American Petroleum without asking for competitive bids. The leases were legal, but the gifts were not. Fall's attempts to keep the gifts secret failed, and on April 14, 1922, the Wall Street Journal exposed the bribes. Fall denied the charges, but when one of the oil company executives revealed that he had given the secretary a $100,000 interest-free loan, in 1927, the Supreme Court ruled that the oil leases had been illegally obtained, and the U.S. Navy regained control of Teapot Dome and other reserves. Fall was found guilty of bribery in 1929, fined $100,000 and sentenced to 1 year in prison. He was the first cabinet member imprisoned for his actions while in office. President Harding was not aware of the scandal at the time of his death in 1923, but it contributed to his administration being considered one of the most corrupt in history. Number 2. Watergate. Watergate is the name of the scandal that caused Richard Nixon to become the only U.S. president to resign from office. On May 27, 1972, concerned that Nixon's bid for re-election was in jeopardy, former CIA agent E. Howard Hunt Jr., former New York Assistant District Attorney G. Gordon Liddy, former CIA operative James W. McCord Jr., and 6 other men broke into the Democratic headquarters in the Watergate Hotel in Washington, D.C. They wiretapped phones, stole some documents, and photographed others. When they broke in again on June 17th to fix a bug that wasn't working, a suspicious security guard called the Washington police, who arrested McCord and 4 other burglars. A cover-up began to destroy incriminating evidence, obstruct investigations, and halt any spread of scandal that might lead to the president. On August 29th, Nixon announced that the break-in had been investigated and that no one in the White House was involved. Despite his efforts to hide his involvement, Nixon was done in by his own tape recordings, one of which revealed that he had authorized hush money paid to Hunt. To avoid impeachment, Nixon resigned on August 9, 1974. His successor, President Gerald Ford, granted him a blanket pardon on September 8, 1974, eliminating any possibility that Nixon would be indicted and tried. Number 3. The Iran-Contra Affair. On July 8, 1985, President Ronald Reagan told the American Bar Association that Iran was part of a confederation of terrorist states. He failed to mention that members of his administration were secretly planning to sell weapons to Iran to facilitate the release of U.S. hostages held in Lebanon by pro-Iranian terrorist groups. Profits from the arms sales were secretly sent to Nicaragua to aid rebel forces, known as the Contras, in their attempt to overthrow the country's democratically elected government. The incident became known as the Iran-Contra Affair, and was the biggest scandal of Reagan's administration. The weapons sale to Iran was authorized by Robert McFarlane, head of the National Security Council, NSC, in violation of US government policies regarding terrorists and military aid to Iran. NSC staff member Oliver North arranged for a portion of the $48 million paid by Iran to be sent to the Contras, which violated a 1984 law banning this type of aid. North and his secretary Fawn Hall also shredded critical documents. President Reagan repeatedly denied rumors that the United States had exchanged arms for hostages, but later stated that he'd been misinformed. He created a special review board to investigate. In February 1987, the board found the president not guilty. Others involved were found guilty, but either had their sentences overturned on appeal or were later pardoned by President George H.W. Bush. Number 4. The Keating Five. After the US banking industry was deregulated in the 1980s, savings and loan banks were allowed to invest deposits in commercial, not just residential real estate. Many savings banks began